Did it come up? Yeah, it came up.
You live.
All right. So, Shabbat Shalom, everyone. I hope that everyone is having a prosperous Shabbat. And I too want to say how nice of a time we had this past Sunday. For me, it was a little bit more. Um, it's a little bit more important because it was my birthday. I didn't really tell nobody, but it's blessed to see another year. I'm getting old. I don't understand it, but it's good. So we are just going to jump right on into it. Now, this past Yom Shabbat, the Akim and I were sitting down, fellowshipping after service, and I made a comment about how you can't keep too many doors open. I'll use a dream I had as an example, okay? And I've told this dream a while back in one of our lessons on prayer, I do believe. Some of you may remember, some of you may not. So just in case you're new, I'll read it again, okay? It was called Close the Door. I was living in a high-rise building, but owned an abandoned house. Um, Abandoned house that was boarded up. I could see this house from a window inside the apartment. It was situated in a field that was across the road. But for some reason, I kept leaving the door open. I would see the door open from the window and rush down to go close it. I would go in the house, which oddly had lights on for some reason. And after clearing the house, meaning, making sure no one was living in there, I would close the door. So I thought, you know, only to look out that same window to see it open again. So I repeated this process a couple of times until I realized that I didn't bring the key to actually lock the door. So once I realized I needed the key, I went looking for it. That was a struggle in itself, but once I found the key, then it became a struggle getting back to the house in order to lock the door. All of a sudden, the terrain changed. It went from sunny and warm to overcast and snowy. And it was deep snow, that was hard to step in and out of, And for some reason, the door wasn't, a regular house door. It was made of thick plywood, but it had an actual door lock in it. So once I got to the door, I was able to go in the house and clear it out again. And this time close and actually lock the door. And when I was able to achieve that, I believe the area cleared up and was no longer overcast with snow. So the gist of this dream was, and I'm just adding this because I didn't see it before. The Father gave me this revelation on this dream that's been reoccurring for some reason. But the gist of it is just what Moreh Lamadyahu has been saying in his lessons. The Father has given us all these chances to get things right. At some point, you have to seize this opportunity. It's not going to be easy. As a matter of fact, like I said about the dream, it became very difficult. It was a struggle. Why? Because once you realize that you have things that need to be taken care of, that's when everything starts to happen at once, right? Test after test, struggle after struggle. But understand that your today and certainly your tomorrow is not promised. As I read in that dream, there were obstacles, you know, that I faced, but no matter what the obstacles was, I completed my task. I made sure that I endured to the end so I can complete my task. And this is a principle that should apply to everyone that's hearing me right now. No matter what obstacles you face, you still have to complete your task. Now, for this lesson, and in this case, it's being clean versus unclean. I know it says, Father, save me, where it's a mindset change, but it has to do with being clean, right? And we'll get to that a little later on in the lesson. But now something else Moreh talked about in his last lesson, it's about getting our garments clean, which is getting us clean. If we want to make it, if we want to get into the kingdom, that's one of the things we're going to have to do. And the crazy thing is, with these lessons, the Father is showing that it's the little things that can keep you out of the kingdom. Something so little as miscommunication between two people can ruin your name in those books that the Malachim are keeping. Yet at this very moment, you have an opportunity to right that ship. I also stated that until the Father feels as though we as a people understand what he's telling us, these lessons won't change. These types of lessons that you hear all four of us do won't change. We will stay right here. That's how important this is. Understand, there are thousands of people that are on this channel, maybe hundreds of those who watch every week. And then it's you all who come back every week on Zoom and on YouTube. You guys have been drawn here for a reason, right? Everybody says that they thank the Father for showing them, this assembly. That's the Father right there, and that's a reason to rejoice, because He wants you to go to the right place. And you all say that you feel the love and it feels like home. Well, this is where you're supposed to be. When I sit back and think about all the places I could be right now, just like you, He led me here. And after I failed so many tests, He still gave me a purpose. Are you hearing me? And by no means am I greater than any of you. So if the Father can forgive me and still place me where He wants me to be, what's your excuse? And this is obviously for somebody. Somebody needed to hear this. That's why I'm saying it. So you need to pick yourself up and understand you are here for a reason. You didn't think of none of this on your own. You might have prayed for the Father to save you a long time ago. But like we saw with the last lesson, and we'll see it again, you have to be in the right frame of mind in order to not only make such a request from the Father, oh, save me, rescue me, deliver me, but in order to actually receive that. This is why He places obstacles in our paths. We still have to learn how to maneuver through these things, right? Hallelujah. All right, let's begin. So, in both testaments, salvation deals with deliverance from danger and restoration to wholeness and prosperity. Now, it involves victory from forces that threaten that wholeness and prosperity, such as enemies and sickness. Now, the Brit Kadashah, commonly called the New Testament, emphasizes the work of Yahushua as the one who saves people from sin and death. But it is clear that salvation is holistic and involves the well-being of the whole person. So let's look at that definition, right? To be holistic is categorized by comprehension of the parts of something as intimately interconnected and explicably only by reference to the whole. And medically speaking, categorized by the treatment of the whole person, taking into account mental and social factors rather than just the symptoms of a disease. Now, biblically, Biblically, this is just to re-emphasize that you have to be in this walk wholeheartedly. And yeah, I know here there's no straddling the fence over here. All right. Because if you do something like that, that leaves room for destruction, turmoil, chaos, even. All right. If you want the help from the Father, then you need to look beyond just what you're going through now. Because what you're going through now is a result of something else that you may have neglected to take a look at in the beginning. Now, keep in mind, I said may because that's not always the case, right? But let's be honest here. Some of the things that we ask from the Father should start at home. What do I mean? Well, how about helping? Hmm? Helping others. We talked about this before. You know how we pray to the Father, for help. Help me out of my situation, no matter what it is. Well, do you do these things for other people? Help can go a long way. Remember, we said this before. Simply calling and checking on someone can fill a void for someone. That person you call could be in a mindset that they believe no one wants to talk to them. They pray to the Father to send someone to talk to me. The Father sends you. You see how that works? And what else? Father, show me a sign. That's a popular one. We always want the Father to show us something. Father, show me a sign. It just so happens that you are watching a lesson from a certain Moreh, and he confirms the very thing you prayed about. Now the ball is in your court. Are you going to heed the word the Father gave you, or find the excuse not to act upon it? Remember, the Father can and will use anything or anyone to get his message across. Now, these words came back to bite me, and let me explain. Let's take what happened with a certain celebrity a week ago. I ain't gonna say his name, but you know who I'm talking about. A video surfaced of him saying that Black people were in fact the true descendants from the Bible. All right. Now, within a day or two, he was fired from a well-known TV station, and he was widely criticized for his remarks. Now, just like a well-known football player before him, this celebrity backtracked a little and apologized. Now, here's where I say my words came back to bite me. Remember, I just said the Father can use anything and any platform he chooses, right? He can use anybody, no matter if you're in the truth or not. He uses whatever tools he deems fit enough to get his message across. Now, stop and think about that for a moment. Do you think that what this celebrity said had an impact on this society? Let's forget the fact that he apologized. Now, because of this, people are starting to research and ask questions. Starting to open dialogues. Um, that's what we need to start paying attention to. So my point is that when you ask the Father to help you with a certain situation, don't look for the solution or the answer to come the way you want it to. Just know that when you see it, act on it. Be obedient. Don't look for excuses not to do it. There are people out there who want to be in this truth but don't know where to begin. Guess what? All that talk that celebrity did could have been the open door that someone was looking for. You have to understand that Yahuah doesn't owe us anything, right? The mere fact that he's willing to show us his chesed love, his steadfast love, should be enough for you to at least try. All right. So with that said, let's look at what salvation brought or didn't bring to the table in the Near Ancient East. All right. Now, before I get started, I just want to say that most of what I'm going to read these next couple of slides comes from the book entitled David's Death. Mesopotamia, Canaan, and Anatolia. In Mesopotamia, Canaanite, and Hittite religions, most people had a negative view of the afterlife. Humans were created to serve the gods, and the gods did not want humans to live forever. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, Gilgamesh is told, the life that you seek, you never will find. When the gods created mankind, death they dispensed to mankind. Life they kept for themselves. Ain't that something? There was no conception of judgment after death. Rather, everyone went to an unpleasant underworld. So no matter what you did, no matter what you said, you still went to the same place as everybody else. Rituals for the dead were designed not to improve the post-mortem experience, but to ensure that the dead did not bother the living. Common people did not have any hope of improving their lot in the afterlife. Although they might have assumed special treatment for deceased rulers, as a result, desires for salvation focus on present circumstances. When Ugaritic prayer asks for physical rescue, O Baal, if you will drive the strong one from our gates, the warrior from our walls, a bull, O Baal, we shall dedicate. Such requests for salvation usually were tempered by pessimism about whether the deities cared enough to intervene. One poem laments, my God has not come to the rescue, my grave was waiting. And we talked a little bit about this a couple lessons ago when it came down to sacrifice, about how they were worshiping these deities just to appease them because they were so afraid that if they didn't do certain things, the gods would be mad and punish them. Like, who wants to go their whole life just doing something to appease somebody and not getting anything in return? But that's a whole nother story. That's what they did. Now, let's talk about Egypt. Now, although some Egyptians believed that a happy afterlife was possible based on virtuous living and or divine grace, others thought the afterlife would be gloomy. The rulers were considered divine and could expect a happy afterlife. For them, the afterlife was seen as more life, not death, and life with the negativities removed. Now, the scholar Osman argues that this blessed afterlife was restricted to Egypt's kings in the early dynasties and did not open up to others until starting in the 6th dynasty about 2200 BC. Somebody needs to be muted. Somebody has a question? Need to be muted. Okay. Eventually, a happy afterlife was available to all based on virtue, right? Because Egyptians believed in a judgment after death, they emphasized pure living. Nevertheless, rituals seeking divine help could compensate for a person's impurities. In Egyptian mortuary literature, prayers for salvation are concerned above all with the idea of judgment of the dead, which no one could hope to survive without divine grace. Although a person who failed at the judgment will go into oblivion, the papyri record only success, never failure. Success in the judgment seemed to depend more on knowledge of the correct rituals than on how a person had lived. But a large majority of the population could not read and did not know the precise rituals. And funeral laments indicate that they were not very hopeful about the afterlife. So if you couldn't read, you kind of out of luck. Starting around 1000 BC, evidence suggests that Egyptians lived with the sad certainty that a deceased person loses individual consciousness and lingers in a gloomy state of slumber. However, there are also signs in Egyptian stories, pictures, and practices pointing to hope for an afterlife that somewhat resemble present existence. Now, what I'm getting at here is that just like with some of us today, and like always, I'm referring to people in this walk, right? Some of us have a certain mindset that's not focused on the right things. With that being said, things we focus on can lead and probably will be one of the main reasons why some of us don't make it into the kingdom. I'm certainly not saying that that will be the only thing, but the way you view things mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally have a huge impact on how you react to those same things mentally, physically, spiritually, and emotionally. And as we saw earlier with the Mesopotamian, the Canaanites, and Anatolia religions, the so-called gods or deities didn't even care about the people. And here, with our ancestors and with us, we had the Father who cares enough for us to give us all these chances, chance after chance after chance. And people don't want to take it. They were looking for something so they can at least have some hope. The Father's giving us hope, and we still ain't taking it. So that's what the other part of the title is. Where's the mindset change? You can't keep asking for something, and because you're not getting it the way you want to, disregard it. And that's where a lot of us are still. All right. Now, we did, like I said before, we did a lesson a while ago on what was it called? The ancient Egyptian offering formula. I don't know how many of y'all remember that, but this gave an insight on what happened when someone died according to Egyptian practices, right? So the ancient Egyptian offering formula. The offering formula is shown on a funerary stela. You can see over here. On this particular stela, the formula begins on the first line and reads from right to left. The offering formula, also known under the transliterated forms of its incipit, was Hotep de Nasut, right? From a conventional uh, dictionary formula found on ancient Egyptian funerary objects, excuse me. Believed to allow the deceased to partake in offerings presented to the major deities in the name of the king, or in offerings presented directly to the deceased by family members. It is among the most common of all Middle Egyptian texts. Now, its insipid Hotep de Nuset, an offering given by the king, is followed by the name of a deity and a list of offerings given. The offering formula is usually found carved on painted onto funerary stela, all right, false doors, coffins, and sometimes other funerary objects. Each person had their own name and titles put into the formula. The offering formula was not a royal prerogative like some of the other religious texts, such as the Litany of Ra, and was used by anyone who could afford to have one. Now, keep in mind, we just read that most of the people didn't do this because they couldn't read. Now, you add money to the mix, so my thing was back then, it wasn't about what you did, to please Elohim that got you to where you wanted to go in the afterlife. It was what you could recite and how much money you had that might have had an impact on things. Now, today, most people just refuse to do the little things that could help them tremendously in getting into the kingdom. And hey, guess what? It probably wouldn't cost you a penny. It's like I always say, obedience breeds rewards, right? Remember that. All right, salvation. Salvation is a rescue from a state of danger and restoration to wholeness and prosperity. In the Bible, people are saved from foreign nations, from enemies, and from the penalty of sin. Salvation also entails health, wholeness, and victory. Now, the biblical concept of salvation as it develops from the sense of physical rescue in the present life to deliverance from danger or crises to the idea of spiritual rescue often associated with the afterlife, right? So that's where we taking a step back from what they did in ancient Near East. Forgiveness from sins and eternal life. Now, this development in the concept of salvation corresponds with changes in beliefs regarding life after death. As views about the afterlife become more optimistic, the understanding of salvation expanded beyond the present world to include hopes for divine deliverance and even resurrection in the world to come. In the Bible's salvation usually comes from Elohim, all right, or Yahusha, or an agent of Elohim. Now, terms for salvation include the H3467, which is Yasha, and the H3444, which is Shua. These are the Hebrew words most often translated as save and salvation. Now, in the Greek Kadashah, commonly called the New Testament, you have the G4982, which is sozo, and you have the G4991, which is soteria. Now, these are the Greek words meaning save and salvation. So, it's all to save, deliver, help, to be helped, to be victorious. The core meaning of this verb involves helping or saving from danger. Some forms can refer to being helped or being victorious. This is the primary verb for salvation in the Hebrew, right? It literally refers to helping or saving from danger. Now, it is often used of giving victory in battle. We can see an example of that in Psalms 20:6. Now, I know that Yahuah saves his anointed. I know that Yahuah saves his anointed. He will answer him from his set apart or his holy heaven with the saving might of his right hand. All right. Now, both Elohim and humans can save people, right? Moses saved the daughters of Jethro from the shepherds. We see an example of that in Exodus 2:17. The shepherds came and drove them away, but Moses stood and saved them and watered their flocks. So these are all just examples we're going to see right now in the Old Testament. Elohim saved Israel from the Egyptians in Exodus 14-30, and later from their enemies through the judges in Judges 2:18. Thus Yahuwah saved Israel that day from the hand of the Egyptians. And Israel saw the Egyptians dead on the seashore. Judges 2:18. Whenever Yahuwah raised up judges for them, Yahuwah was with the judge, and he saved them from the hand of their enemies all the days of the judge. For Yahuwah was moved to pity by their groaning because of those who afflicted and oppressed them. Now, in Psalms 6:5, David asked Yahuwah to save his soul, or his nefesh, i.e., his life. All right. For in death there is no remembrance of you, and Sheol, who will give you praise. Now, that's just David, giving a reason for Yahuwah to act, saying that death will prevent him from publicly um, proclaiming Yahuwah's deliverance. Now, and we have Psalms 30:9 and Psalms 115:17. What profit is there in my death if I go down to the pit? Will the dust praise you? Will they tell of your faithfulness? In Psalms 115:17, the dead do not praise Yahuwah, nor do any who go down into silence. So again, this is David's argument that he will be unable to praise Yahuwah or tell others of his faithful restoration if he were dead. It would be better for Yahuwah to deliver him. So how many know someone who does say, Father, if you just save me from this situation, I promise I'll praise your name every single day. All right. And what about if you came from the church? I promise I'll get up every Sunday and go to church. Huh? Or if you're in the walk, Father, give me up this and I promise I'll stop eating pork. You should have stopped eating pork anyway. But with all this, you just turn around and do the same thing over and over again. Not saying that that's what David did, but that's what today's people do all the time. That's what I'm saying. Again, where's your mindset change? Because you shouldn't just be calling out to the Father for something, because you need it right at that point. You should be praising the Father all the time, right? But David was saying, hey, if I'm gone, I can't do none of that. Right? All right. The Elohims made by humans cannot save the people. We see this in Jeremiah 2:28. But where are your Elohims that you made for yourself? Let them arise if they can save you in your time of trouble, for as many as your cities are your Elohims, O Judah. All right, Jeremiah, now we can compare this to Jeremiah 2:6 and 2 and 8, where it says, but where are your Elohims that you made for yourself? Now, this is where the priests failed to ask the question of Yahuah. They did not say, where is Yahuah, who brought us up from the land of Egypt, who led us in the wilderness, in the land of deserts and pits, in a land of drought and deep darkness, a land that none passes through, where no man dwells. In Jeremiah 2 and 8, the priest did not say, where is Yahuah? Those who handled the law did not know me. The shepherds transgressed against me. The prophets prophesied by Baal and went after things that do not profit. Now, just like back in Egypt and Mesopotamia, there was no living Elohim that could save these people. From the past lessons, we learned that most of the other Elohims that these people worship would even help them throughout the course of their lives, right? Yet they still felt a need to worship him. Now, today, we got people who think that just because their ancestors were part of the original covenant, that they are a shoo-in when it comes to getting into the kingdom. All right. Now, of course, we know that's not true, right? But in the same breath, you have to understand, this is not burdensome. I'm trying to say it's not hard. It's not as hard as you may think it is, right? The Father doesn't require much out of you. Just do what our ancestors agreed to do at Mount Sinai, and that was just keep the core of the covenant. All these things he said we will do. That's what we should be doing if we agree to the same covenant. All right. Now, Yeshua, salvation, deliverance, victory, help. Now, this refers to salvation from danger. This now is related to the verb yasha, to save. It primarily refers to the salvation from danger or trouble, especially from enemies. It is used of Yahuwah's deliverance of Israel from Egypt at the Red or the Red Sea. All right. So in 1 Samuel, well, actually, let's go to Exodus 14 and 13 first. All right, Exodus 14 and 13. And Moses said to the people, fear not, stand firm and see the salvation of Yahuwah, which he will work for you today. For the Egyptians whom you see today, you shall never see again. Kadisha, you had a question?
No worries.
Okay, you good?
Meaning never mind. Yeah, I'm
Okay.
good. I just did the name study with Lamadyahu's video, and the Yeshua. I thought, from my understanding, wasn't that like an Aramaic way of saying Yahuah saves, or Yahusha?
Yeah, Yahuwah said, yeah, something to that effect. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it just means Yeshua literally means he saves.
Yeah, he saves. Yeah.
Yeah, the yod in the front just means he, and then Shua meaning save in Aramaic.
Okay.
All right. Now, in 1 Samuel 2 and 1, Hannah identifies the birth of Samuel, according to Elohim's promise to her as salvation from Elohim, while she is not being saved from military enemies per se. She's being saved from trouble and from the ridicule of her husband's other wife. So 1 Samuel 2 and 1. And Hannah prayed and said, my heart exalts in Yahuwah. My horn is exalted in Yahuwah. My mouth derides my enemies because I rejoice in your salvation. All right. Okay, so for the New Testament of the Brit Hadashah, we start off with the G4982. This is sozo. All right. To save, i.e. deliver or protect, literally or figuratively heal, preserve, save self, do well, be or make whole. Now, this verb denotes saving from death or harm. The basic sense of saving from death appears clearly in Luke 23 and 35, where people mock Yahushua for being unable to save himself by coming down from the tree. Luke 23 and 35. And the people stood by watching, but the rulers scoffed at him, saying, he saved others, let him save himself. If he is the Mashiach of Elohim, his chosen one. Now, let's start to break, this down a little bit. The first part of the verse, and the people stood by watching. Now, we can compare this with Psalms 22 and 7. And all who see me mock me. They make mouths at me. They wag their heads. Right? Now, let's look at Matthew 27, 39 to 42. And those who passed by derided or ridiculed him, wagging their heads and saying, you who would destroy the temple and rebuild it in 3 days, save yourself. If you are the son of Elohim, come down from the cross. So also the chief priests, the scribes, and the elders mocked him, saying, he saved others, he cannot save himself. He is the king of Israel. Let him come down from the cross, and we will believe in him. Now, let's read this in the Syriac and get a slightly different version. And they that passed by reviled him and shook their heads and said, destroyer of the temple and builder of it in 3 days, deliver thyself if thou art the son of Elohim, and come down from the cross. So also the chief priests mocked with the scribes and elders and the Pharisees, and said, he gave life to others, his own life he cannot preserve. If he is the king of Israel, let him now descend from the cross, and we will believe in him. He entrusted in Elohim, let him rescue him now, if he have pleasure in him, for he said, I am the son of Elohim. And this is how they thought back then. Now, we all know the outcome after the death of Mashiach, but how does this pertain to today? I mean, think about it. Look at what the world is doing with all the abominations that are going on, just letting everything that is against Yahuah out in the open. Now, what about the people in the walk? A lot of them aren't any better. How many doctrines are floating around denouncing the very word that was set forth from the beginning? And just like Moreh Lamadyahu said this past Yom Shabbat, you have people who deny the Mashiach solely based on his name as we know it, which is not mentioned in Torah. So because they don't see it in the beginning, he must not exist. These types of doctrines are designed to mock the word, not make it set apart. And for those who are new and or don't have found a strong enough foundation, this can cause a stumbling block. All right, so let's look at Luke 23 and 39. One of the criminals who were hanged railed at him, saying, are you not the Mashiach? Save yourself and us. Now, the second part of the verse from Luke 23 and 35, but the rulers scoffed at him, saying he saved others. Let's look at Matthew 27 and 41 through 42. So also the chief priests with the scribes and the elders mocked him, saying, he saved others, he cannot save himself. He is the king of Israel, let him come down now from the cross, and we will believe in him. All right, now this is the same thing they said in Mark 15, 31 to 32. So also the chief priests with the scribes mocked him to one another, saying, he saved others, he cannot save himself. Let the Mashiach, the king of Israel, come down now from the cross, that he may see and believe. Those who were crucified with him also reviled him. All right, now, and let's look at the last part of the verse from Luke 23 and 35. Let him save himself if he is the Mashiach of Elohim, his chosen one. Now let's compare this to Matthew 26 and 53. Do you think that I cannot appeal to my Father and he will at once send more than 12 legions of angels, commonly called or Malachim? All right. Now, a quick side note. When the Mashiach talks about the 12 legions of angels, all right, he's talking about the G3003, which is legion, right? i.e. a Roman regiment, right? Soldiers. This is compared to a Roman legion that had about 5,000 to 6,000 soldiers. So when the Mashiach is referring to the 12 legions of angels, commonly called messengers, Malachim, this indicates that at least 60,000 messengers, right? So you can just get a sense of Luke 8 and 30 a little more significant when we read it after that. In Luke 38 and 30, you should then ask him, "What is your name?" And he said, "Legion, for many demons have entered him." Can you imagine that? See, that's how I always. Mm, yes, thank you, Father. That's why I always say, you can't fight your battles on your own. If you got stuff that is on you, you don't know how many is on you. Because I said this before, when you're being attacked, you're not being attacked by one thing. It's many things that you're being attacked for. This is why the Father says the battle is not yours. Second Chronicles 20 and 15, and he said, "Here are ye chiefs of Judah, and ye inhabitants of Jerusalem, and thou King Jehoshaphat. Thus says Yahuah to you, be not terrified nor dismayed because of this vast multitude, for the battle is not yours, but Elohim's only." And we all know this, Ephesians 6 and 12, "For our conflict is not with flesh and blood, but with the principalities and with those in authority, and with the possessors of this dark world, and with the evil spirits that are beneath heaven." The Father already knows if you can't handle things on your own. That's why he gave the order to stand down. Now, that's also why he set up people who could help you in a certain situation. That's why you have leaders. That's why you have mores. They ain't up there to boast, to show you how much information they know. That's not what they're supposed to do, right? If they are truly walking in the Ruach, they are doing this in attempts to help you get right with the Father. And that's all any of us really want, right? We all want to make it. You can't get there on your own, but that doesn't mean that you are alone either. If for some reason this concept was lost on our ancestors too, remember what Daniel said about this. This is coming from the scriptures. Daniel 9, 5 and 6. "We have sinned and did crookedness and did wrong and rebelled to turn aside from your commands and from your right rulings." Look at this. "And we have not listened to your servants, the prophets, who spoke in your name to our sovereigns, our heads, and our fathers, and to all the people of the land." Hmm. And another thing when it comes to mores, when you seek a more for help, understand that that's what we're here for, is to help. The thing is, we can't help unless you help us understand the situation at hand. So in other words, if you truly want help, you have to trust us with information. You got to understand communication is key. Withholding things because it might be embarrassing, or you are the type that you don't like confrontation. I get that. I get all of that. But if the information that you are withholding could be used to help you, just say it. Because we can only petition to the Father with the information we have, right? So if you really want the help and deliverance that comes with it, entrust us with that vital information, okay? Now, someone obviously needed to hear that because the Father told me to say it. So whoever it was for, heed these words, please, okay? All right, so one last thing and then we'll move on. Our hope is in the Father, right? Our help comes from the Father. But for some reason, not all, but some of us, we just can't seem to embrace that. When the help or the answer to a prayer doesn't come in the form that you wanted, I know I said this before, but some have the tendency to reject it. Then they turn around and say, "I just don't understand why my prayers aren't being answered," when the form of help or that answer that you were waiting on had been there the whole time. So in other words, we have to learn to take our emotions out of the equation. This is what the Father deems appropriate, not us. He dictates what needs to happen. So you need to stand still and have patience, right? All right, let's continue. Now, back to Matthew 26 and 53. So When he said all this, do you think I cannot appeal to my Father, and he will at once send me more than 12 legions of angels, right? This is the Michelle basically saying, do you think that if I really wanted any help, I can't just call on my Father to provide my backup, right? This taunt from the rulers is full of irony. That's why I read all of all of the comparisons to it. I want you to understand that all these people that were taunting him is full of irony. All right. Had Yahushua saved himself, he would not be able to fulfill his mission to come for those who are truly lost, to help those who really wanted to help. So this shows what type of mindset they were in at the time, and honestly where some of us are now. Your lips say, save me, but your actions and your thoughts that the Father can't see, remember? The inner man is always visible to the Father. Those things say otherwise. Now, let me just say, this isn't for those who are trying. And this isn't for those who are diligently seeking the Father. I'm talking about those who are dismissive, the ones who say they know better than you, but are the ones asking the questions, right? Okay. Now, in the Gospels or the good news, Yahushua saves or sozo, i.e. heals people from illness. We can see an example of this in Matthew 9:20-22. And behold, a woman who had suffered from a discharge of blood for 12 years came up behind him and touched the fringe of his garment. For she said to herself, if I only touch his garment, I will be made well. And Yahushua turned and seeing her, he said, take heart, daughter, your faith has made you well. Now, Yahushua often cites a person's faith as a driving factor for healing. Now, when you get a chance, you can check that out in some of the different verses. You can revisit Matthew 8:13, Matthew 9:29, 15 and 28, and it will give you a little bit more understanding of what I said right there. Now, but for us, let's look at Mark 6:56. And whenever he came in villages, cities, or country or the countryside, they laid the sick in the marketplaces and implored him that they might touch even the fringe of his garment. And as many as touched it were made well. So again, we can see how stepping out on faith, diligently seeking the word, healed them, or the Greek word sozo. Yahushua also saves them from demons. And we just read it, but we're going to read it again, starting with verse 30. So Luke 8:30-36. Yahushua then asked him, what is your name? And he said, Legion, for many demons have entered him. And they begged him not to command them to depart into the abyss. Now, a large herd of pigs were feeding there on the hillside, and they begged him to let them enter these, to enter these. So he gave them permission. Then the demons came out of the man and entered the pigs, and the herd rushed down the steep bank into the lake and drowned. When the herdsmen saw what had happened, they fled and told it in the city and in the country. Then people went out to see what had happened. They came to Yahushua and found the man from whom the demons had gone, sitting at the feet of Yahushua, clothed and his right mind, and in his right mind, and they were afraid. And those who had seen it told them how the demon-possessed man had been healed. Now, how much of the word do you reference in your time of need? Your ancestors literally ran to the source because they knew the word could heal. Not man, not themselves, or like we read earlier, other deities like how the Egyptians and Mesopotamians did. How many of us carry that mindset right now to run to the source to get your help? Think about that, all right? Ask yourself that question. And while you're doing it, let's look in Luke 6:9. Yahushua defends healing on the Sabbath by asking whether it's lawful to save or sozo life on the Sabbath. And Yahushua said to them, I ask you, is it lawful on the Sabbath to do good or to do harm, to save life, or to destroy it? Now, so another Greek word for salvation is the G4991. All right. Soteria. All right, means to rescue or safety, deliver, health, salvation, save, and saving. All right. This is a noun, salvation, wholeness, and safety. This can refer to salvation from enemies, but in the Brit Hadashah, commonly called the New Testament, is usually used of salvation from sin and death through the Mashiach. This noun is related to sozo, to save, and means salvation, wholeness, and safety. In the Septuagint, and the closely in the Septuagint, soteria, and the closely related word sotereros, salvation, are the usual translations of the Hebrew, right? Including when these words refer to military victory and rescue from enemies. So in the Brit Hadashah, commonly called the New Testament, soteria can refer to rescue from enemies and physical dangers. And we'll see examples of this in Luke 1:71, Hebrews 11:7, and this can also be a form of salvation from sins, which we'll see in Luke 1:77. So Luke 1:71, that we should be saved from our enemies and from the hand of all who hate us. In Hebrews 11:7, by faith, Noah, being warned by Elohim concerning events as yet unseen, in reverent fear constructed an ark for the saving of his household. By this he condemned the world and became an heir of the righteousness that comes by faith. You got that word faith again, right?
A quick question for you, Moreh.
Yes.
Okay, so just so I'm tracking, so to speak, you're going over save, salvation, and you're showing levels of save. Like you're saying, hey, right now we're on a level of dealing with save or protection of some sort from the heat. You know, when they have, for example, salvation through healing and through things like that, and then from there you're building towards salvation. Let's say eternally, or we're more or less into salvation as we go through our daily activities throughout our lives, so to speak.
Correct.
Okay.
I wanted to parallel, what they were doing in the ancient Near East, how they tried to transition that over from your ancestors in the Old Testament, and how they went from there over to the New Testament, which is where we are now.
Okay.
All right. All right. So in the Syriac, it uses life instead of saving. All right. So in Hebrews 11:7 in the Syriac, by faith Noah, when he was told of things not seen, feared, and he made himself an ark for the life of his household, whereby he condemned the world and became an heir of the righteousness which is by faith. All right. All right. So the word for faith in the Greek is the G4102. All right. It's pistis. It's persuasion, i.e., credence or conviction of religious truth, or the truthfulness of Elohim or a religious teacher. So let's look at the worldly definition for a moment. And this is the verb of it. It's a firmly held belief or opinion, i.e., she takes pride in stating her political convictions. Now, similarly, it means belief, opinion, view, thought, persuasion, idea, position, stance, but an article of faith. So the way the Father, let me give you an example. So the way the Father convicts me to do or say something is having that certain something repeat at least 3 times. So if the Father wants me to pray, I will get the urge at least 3 times to pray. Then I know, hey, I better get on it. So how many times have you had that sudden urge to do something, but you ignore it? Understand obedience is the name of the game, right? When he wants you to move, you need to move, or you will risk setting yourself back to the starting line. So let's keep it going now. Remember, this whole thing, like Moreh is trying to get to, this whole thing has to do about what you need to do in order to get to a certain state. And that's why I said it was really going to talk about being clean versus unclean. That was my main goal, but I wanted to kind of give a breakdown of how all this stuff progressed. Um, so salvation from sin. Ezekiel stresses the need for salvation from uncleanness, impurity, and idolatry. And we'll see this in Ezekiel 36:22-32. I will put my spirit of Ruach within you. Therefore say to the house of Israel, thus says Yahuah Elohim, is it not for your sake, it is not for your sake, O house of Israel, that I am about to act, but for the sake of my set apart name, which you have profaned among the nations to which you came. And I will vindicate the holiness of my great name, which has been profaned among the nations, and which you have profaned among them. And the nations will know that I am Yahuah, declares Yahuah Elohim, when through you I will vindicate my holiness before their eyes. I will take you from the nations and gather you from all the countries and bring you into your own land. And I will sprinkle clean water on you, and you shall be clean from all your uncleanness, and from all your idols I will cleanse you. And I will give you a new heart, and a new spirit of Ruach I will put within you. And I will remove the heart of stone from your flesh and give you a heart of flesh. And I will put my spirit of Ruach within you and cause you to walk in my statutes and be careful to obey my rules. You shall dwell in the land that I gave to your fathers, and you shall be my people, and I will be your Elohim. And I will deliver you from all your uncleanness. And I will summon the grain and make it abundant, and lay no famine upon you. I will make the fruit of the tree and the increase of the field abundant, that you may never again suffer the disgrace of famine among the nations. Then you will remember your evil ways and your deeds that were not good, and you will loathe yourselves for your iniquities and your abominations. It is not for your sake that I will act, declares Yahuah Elohim. Let that be known to you. Be ashamed and confounded for your ways, O house of Israel. Here, salvation involves a gift of a new heart of flesh and new spirit of Ruach, which will finally empower, Elohim's people to keep the commandments, right? After which comes habitation in the land. Now, too, we encounter a common refrain, such salvation when it comes will be neither for the sake of Israel nor the deeds, but for Elohim and his esteem, right? We're going to be doing this for him. That's why we were created, which has been profaned and which now must be vindicated among the nations. Now, that leads me into the question, because we're still answering these questions. And remember, I said all this has to deal with a mindset change. So someone asked the question, doesn't Romans 14:14 say that I know and am convinced by the Master Yahushua that there is nothing unclean of itself, but to him who considers anything to be unclean, to him it is unclean. So can't I eat my barbecue pork ribs, shrimp, and scallops? Now, I know more than mine. I know you want to chime in on this, but let's just look at that verse again. That's Romans 14:14. But let's try to keep it in context. Start at verse 12. And this is also coming from the scriptures, all right? So starting at verse 12. Each one of us, therefore, shall give an account of itself to Elohim. Therefore, let us not judge one another any longer, but rather judge this, not to put an obstacle or a stumbling block in our brother's way. I know and am persuaded in the Master Yahushua that none at all is common of itself. But to him who regards whatever to be common, to him it is common. And if your brother is grieved because of your food, you are no longer walking in love. Do you not by your food ruin the one from whom Messiah died? Do not then allow your good to be spoken of as evil. For the reign of Elohim is not eating and drinking, but righteousness and peace and joy in the set apart spirit, or Ruah. So somebody tell me what the answer to the question is then, besides Moreh.
Low, you can't eat barbecue pork ribs, shrimp, and scallops.
No.
This is still considered unclean food. This is still considered unclean.
Well, you got to understand this was the use of the food in this verse was used as example. There's many examples of the prophets, even the Mashiach using food to show you what is clean and unclean, right? But this has to deal with knowledge and being puffed up, basically. Right? So clean and unclean now. The biblical categories of clean and unclean relate to ritual purity and describe the condition of something relative to its suitability for being in Elohim's presence. Being unclean disqualifies a person or thing from sharing Elohim's presence. Being clean means that one is able to enter Elohim's presence, right? This sense of readiness to be in Elohim's presence was extended to include moral purity as well as physical or ritual purity. So back to Romans 14, 4 for a moment. All right. The Greek word for common here is the G2839. All right. It's kinos, means common, i.e. shared by all or several, to profane, common, defile. All right. It's common and pure. Now, before you can judge anybody for the things they say, for the things they know or lack thereof, you need to make sure that you are in a position to do so. Even with that being said, we have to learn how to communicate with each other. Condemning someone based on information that they don't agree with won't help anybody. You can cause a stumbling block based on the way you handle the situation, especially if you're doing it in public. Other people who may not have a strong foundation in a particular subject in Torah can find what you're saying and or doing offensive, disheartening, or embarrassing even. These things can cause people to want to leave the walk. So for those who are strong in certain areas, need to learn how to nurture that first. Humble yourself. Remember, you didn't have it all together when you first got into this walk. Moreh, you have something to say about that?
No, no, not really. I mean, I think that some people may use Romans. Most people may use First Timothy chapter 4.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll just probably talk about First Timothy chapter 4 when you get done,
Okay.
versus just coming out of that. And yes, you're going into stumbling blocks and obstacles and things like that, how that can relate to even food and things like that.
Okay.
More.
Go ahead.
Can you give an example of verse 15 as far as something that you could have your brother stumble if it's not food, but as far as not having your good be evil spoken of?
How about, well, if you're not on Facebook, then it probably would be a little difficult, but certain doctrines, how about that? Some things people know more of, Now, it's like I said, nurturing what you know. Because you know more than this person doesn't mean that you try to show them out. Where's the compassion? What's the humility when it comes to teaching your brother something? You don't have to call them out for their lack of knowledge. You know what I'm saying? This is where it says you need to be walking in love, and do not ruin the food by one like the Mashiach did. So it's basically saying, if you know something more than somebody else, what's the sense of letting them know that? How's that going to help the situation? How's that going to help somebody grow? It won't.
Morning. This is
Yes.
Kanisha. Okay, so and I'm just grateful for the Ruach, because that's been happening to me a lot here lately. It's almost like when I don't say much, but I do walk. I try my best to walk in this as much as I can. And the ones I'm around, it's almost sometimes like a mockery, like, well, it's your Sabbath. And I try to correct and say, well, it's not my Sabbath, it's Yahuah's Sabbath. But it's kind of like a mockery. And you do want to kind of tend to like break out scripture and just be like, listen, bop, 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 this is what, and but the Ruach has definitely settled me a lot. But so how do you balance that? Because especially for those who don't have a lot of the mishpachah around them. And I mean, for me, that would be me doing like a total isolation. And there's sometimes too where I do get around my some of my family, and I can't and I'm not trying to say that I'm judging, and it's just sometimes I can't even like my spirit can't take us. I can't tend to be around a lot of things anymore. And I'm not trying to judge, but it creates some kind of indignation in a way. And so the spirit kind of tries to teaches me how to settle myself in a way. So how do you balance that? And how do you, I guess it's really hard to do, honestly.
Well, first of all, you're not judging. You have to understand you're being set apart. And because you're using your wisdom, you're starting to see the stuff that's going on in the world in a different light. So it's not you judging them. It's just you're taking yourself out of the world, out of what they're doing. Now, as far as, when people come at you and they mock you, sometimes, you just gotta let it be, because throwing scripture at somebody, especially someone who's in a mocking face, it's not going to do any good, because they're not going to hear you. They're not going to understand what you're saying. They probably don't want to understand what you're saying. It could be lonely sometimes in these situations, I understand, but sometimes you just have to learn how to hold your peace. I
Yeah,
don't really have any other way to say it. Moreh, you have something to say? Who else is on here?
yeah. I think that a couple of things. Obviously we know there's a time and place for everything, because you don't want to be able to you don't want stumbling blocks to be created around other family members based off of your response to that particular family member. However, sometimes you have to, if the family member, I don't know if they're Christian or non-Christian, so I'm going to use it as a family member might be a Christian. So if the family member is a Christian, and you use simple scriptures or writings to say, well, the reason why I do this is because when I read this, it tells me this. Have you read this? What did you get out of it? Now, if they haven't read it, it's going to stop them there, or I'm just under grace by whatever it is. You say, okay, that's fine. But remember, his words can never come back to him void. His words will judge you in the last days. So what I'm doing is I'm just applying what he says, because I know that when the last days come, I have actually done what he told me to do. So this is why I'm doing it. I'm not doing it for my own selfish or self-righteous way or any indignation, because technically what judge you will be his words, according to John chapter 12, verse 48. It'll tell you, that his words are judged in the last days. So I'm just being held accountable to his words, and this is why I do it. So you're not judging them, you're just sharing why you do it. And in the same time, or in the same breath, you're asking them, you're kind of putting the ball back into their court as to say, now, when I read this, what do you get out of it? And if they can't, well, I just do this. You say, well, but what does this here specifically say? So that's what I'm saying, is just, like you say, you're judging the atmosphere. So you're using your wisdom, you're using, your wisdom, knowledge, and understanding of things. But at the same time, if it's a teaching moment, you can make it a teaching moment. If it's going to be something that's going to be mockery, and you know that at the end of the day, you're going to be mocked, which means, and you're the representation of the Father, which now he's going to be mocked, or his word is going to be mocked, then you postpone that and say, well, I can talk to you offline, or maybe we can go somewhere, sit down and talk. or something. In other words, use that type of wisdom to show that, you're going to be this light, however they see it, whether they like, your answer or not. It's not relevant more than you having an answer at that time.
Toda.
Hallelujah.
Okay. Also, so I just wanted to share what I got out of the lesson. Is this still questioning time?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So what I got out of the lesson, which I believe we're going to, is we're starting from the basics or the fundamentals of salvation or save. In reality, what I got out of the lesson was that your faith and salvation go together. Those two things are hand in hand. And when you learn the fundamental practice, you'll also see how that would work in the end time when you get the ultimate salvation, or ultimately be protected, or ultimately being saved. So from this lesson, what I got out of it is basically walking out things that people were saved by their faith, healed by their faith. These things are all running together as being healed, faith, and saved. As the lesson, I guess, progresses, it will go into, now, if we can get this down as our foundation, then as we move on to the type of salvation and say that everybody's looking for in the end time, you got to make sure you have your fundamentals together first. Because if you don't have that, then the end result is you're just asking questions about something that you won't even be a part of, because you haven't gotten yourself together. You haven't gotten your foundation right. You haven't gotten your faith in order. These things are really, really key to going forward in anything that's dealing with being saved.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else? So what was you saying about 1 Timothy what?
1 Timothy 4. That's the famous Christian quote. So I figure I read it from the trusty King James, and
King
from there,
James.
yeah, if it ain't King James, it ain't right.
I love
So,
King Jimmy.
Oh my
So,
goodness.
so here's how it works. It says, someone's gonna pull it up on the screen so I
I'm
can
trying to
probably see it together. Okay.
float this panel. And
But this is gonna go in line with what you were sharing in Romans. So I'm just kind of putting it all together here.
it's 1 Timothy 4, right?
1 Timothy 4:1. Mm-hmm. That's fine. All right. All right. So it says, now the Spirit speaks expressly that in the latter times some shall depart from the faith. Okay, some are going to be departing from faith, but how are they going to be doing it? Giving heed to seducing spirits, that's 1, and doctrines of devil, that's 2, speaking lies and hypocrisy, 3, having their conscience seared with a hot iron, 4. Now listen to the part that they get into. Forbidding to marry and command to abstain from meats, which Elohim has created to be received with thanksgiving of them which believe and know the truth. For every creature of Elohim is good, and nothing is to be refused. Here we go. For it will be received with thanksgiving, for it is sanctified by the word of Elohim and prayer. Now, when we look at this here, and someone gives you this here, I like to home in on the last couple of parts here, which is 3 through 5. Okay, outside of forbidding to marry and abstaining from meats is where I'm getting at, which Elohim has created to be received with thanksgiving. Now, that right there lets you know that it has to be received, the meats which Elohim has created to be received, not what man has created to be received. He didn't say swine was created to be received. Swine was created, or the pig was created for a purpose. The purpose of the pig is to clean the earth. It's like a vacuum cleaner or a scavenger that would clean the earth. It literally has no pores. It has no nothing to bring out the toxin. Its job really is to clean the earth, just like scallops, shrimp, lobster. Those things are designed to clean the water on the bottom of the bottom feeders are designed to clean the waters. All right. So anyway, so he says that Elohim hath created to be received with thanksgiving. And then it says, of them which believe and what? Know the truth. What do you mean you got to know the truth? Then you have to say, what is truth? My word is truth. My commandments is truth. My law is truth. So if they know what truth is, then they would know what meats can be received with thanksgiving. Then it says, for every creature of Elohim is good, and nothing is to be refused. It is received with thanksgiving. So they're saying every creature, but what creatures is he talking about? Those that know the truth, the ones that are being received, the meats that are to be received, right? So this is what they need to understand the difference. And this is nothing to be refused, it shall be received with thanksgiving, for it is purified. And this is the very, very part I like to hear. I said, for it is purified or sanctified by what? By the word of Elohim. So that means they have to go back to what is called the word of Elohim to let them know what meat, what foods are to be received. And then, and prayer. So yeah, you can pray over the things that is in the word that's considered food. Not what man calls food, not because you like something and it tastes good, I want to do that. So that's what I'm saying. We have to get back to these fundamentals. And once we do that, then we can share, this is why I do what I do. You know, outside of saying now statistically, shrimp, lobster, crab, pig, all are not good for your health. All that causes all kinds of different problems in your body. So just outside of the scriptures, that must mean the Father knows what's good for us and what we should and what we shouldn't eat. You know, so but anyway, I digress there, but I'm saying that sharing this, that sometimes people think that all they need is just this, and that their faith alone is enough to save them or protect them from any harm or any food and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Anybody else? Well, all right, Moreh.
Hallelujah. Hallelujah. All this good word. Hope everybody have, if you had any questions, please write them down, send them in to Lamadyahu@gmail.com. We're going to have Shirach Will